Thank you for joining us on the Winning at Selling podcast. I'm Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems, and with me is Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute.
Every day you trade your time for a better life and better results. No two people make the same time trades, as everyone is different. Beginning with intentions and ending with action will determine your results, your life, and define your reputation. Thank you for investing your time as Bill and I discuss managing your time on episode 555 of the Winning at Selling podcast.
What are we going to do on episode 666? Do we skip it?
Oh, no, we're skipping that. That's
skipping
the 13th floor. We don't go to the 13th floor and we don't have 666. So,
all right. Well, this is going to be a great topic. But before we get into that, we've got chapter 6 of what great salespeople do. And maybe great people, because he talks about Abraham Lincoln being a storyteller. Stories for selling. And now we're starting to get into examples of the story. So last episode, before our guests, 2 weeks ago, we talked about kind of the foundation of how you tell a story. And now he's starting to give examples of the stories and why we use them. Now, one of his main contentions is using stories to change people's minds and hearts and to build relationships. And I think that can be true. Now, I think they get a little bit into, the whole exposing yourself and thought process a little bit, but maybe that's true. I just find it builds relationships. If people understand us at a little bit of a deeper level, we build relationships, and stories are relatable. Abraham Lincoln, he was a president and a storyteller. I have a great story about that. And then also use the examples that attorneys use stories to influence jurors. And I think I told a little bit that I've done a lot of work with a medical device company that had a lot of scientists. And man, those men and women loved to talk about the details and the facts and have 200 bullet points on one slide. And when I tried through my presentation course to get them to tell stories, it was difficult because, and some of the same roadblocks he talks about in this chapter, that people just didn't want to tell stories that say, oh, that's too personal, or they don't really care about that. And so I think the most important thing we can do in stories is they got to make a point. They're not a story to entertain, although they do entertain. They're a story to illustrate and to bring out greater points and to be more memorable. And so to make these work, we need to understand kind of where the customer is, where the prospect is in the buying cycle. And they talk about both the buying cycle and the story ladder. And that's on page 93 and 94. So Scott, do you want to talk about that buying cycle and the story ladder a little bit?
Yeah, the buying cycle was an interesting kind of diagram. It lists 4 things on the left-hand side: needs, cost, solution, and risk. And then it looks through 3 columns as these lines kind of go up and down and down and up. So just think about 4 lines kind of going through 3 different columns. And there's phase 1 is the needs, phase 2 is the details, and then phase 3 is the consequences with these 4 areas. And it was just fascinating to see how the authors brought in all of the 4 areas and how they went up and down. Like solutions kind of peak at the details and then kind of drop down during the consequences. And the risk starts low and then goes really high when it starts getting into the consequences, which is the 3rd column. So it's a great visual image on balancing all 4 of those areas. I thought that was very impressive.
So what's the ladder they talk about, Scott?
Well, the ladder, I think it has 8 rungs to it.
The business to business one. They show 2, business to business and business to consumer.
And they start at the bottom with curious. And I think about when we had Anthony Iannarino on the show. He starts talking about, what is the goal of every phone call the salesperson starts off with a prospect, and that's to create curiosity and interest. And I thought about that every single day when I'm talking with a prospect or writing an email or putting a blog together, is I got to start with creating interest and curiosity. And that's the first step of the rung. And then it moves up from there to needs is the next one. Do you want to talk a little bit about that one?
No, go ahead. I didn't look at I mean, I think these are the common steps of the sales process, right? So
Yeah.
as people are gaining their interest. Now, one of the things, I had a great conversation with a couple of marketing guys a couple of weeks ago, very young gentlemen who are convinced that the sales doesn't start really until the customer has already gone through about 4 of these steps. And then they contact you. They're using your website, they're looking stuff up. And I think there are sales that happen that way, that they've moved through these, they've already made a decision, and you're in the top 3, and that's why they're calling you. So if you're a salesperson that is sitting around waiting for the phone to ring and hoping marketing does all the work for you, that's probably true.
Yeah.
But if you're out there creating them, as you're talking about with a blog, or you're out there sending out notes or making phone calls, yeah, you got to start at the curious level. I think that's really true. And you have to go through all these steps. And if you skip one, sometimes the customer will try and skip one. You've got to make sure that that's covered, because it'll come back as an objection later.
Exactly right. There's no shortcuts. And you think, maybe if a prospect skips it, that you got an easier out. You don't. You have a bigger out, and it's a tougher one because you got to deal with it eventually. So it starts with curiosity, then goes to needs, which I really like. The needs is, avoiding pain or gain pleasure, or it's human motivation on the needs. And then it gets to brainstorming. I like the brainstorming because I think it's really important to explore options. And when a salesperson is directing a conversation with a prospect and brainstorming about options, then you're giving a prospect a choice on which one is best for them. They want to be able to make the decision based on what they think is best for them. People buy for their reasons, not yours. Then once we get into the brainstorming, we move on to the solution. So we pick the option, we find the solution that works best. And in some cases, one person doesn't want to be accountable for a decision. So we have a committee that gets together so we can share the blame.
Well, I think the committee's a lot more common now. I think we're finding in sales that, the older people are saying, okay, let's bring, this group in, especially on a technical sale. That VP might not know as much as a 30-year-old who's been working, kind of in the trenches with a technical product or IT or whatever. And so they're going to bring that team in. I think also the millennials are expecting to be brought into the process earlier. They're less likely to believe or buy in just because the decision was made at a higher level than maybe the baby boomers were able to do. So that process is changing. Maybe, as you say, it's because they don't want to get all the blame themselves, but maybe it's also because they don't feel that they've got the expertise, or they want their group to grow and learn through decision making. But it's real.
Yeah, and if you've got a committee, it's very important as a salesperson and as a leader of the conversation that you poll the committee and you ask the criteria of every single person that's involved in that committee as to what are they looking for, how are they evaluating, what do they want to achieve with it.
Okay, we're gonna have to bust through this because we got 2 more minutes to talk about all the different kinds of stories.
Yep. And then we get to value. So we deliver the value, and then we implement it, and everybody's happy with the decision.
Yeah, so, we hope. Yeah. Except the guy who didn't get his way. So,
well, that's too bad.
Yeah, but I think we do have to take people through these ladders, and what they're saying is the stories help go through these steps, and at any time in these steps, we can get halted. Right? We can have an objection. We can not be understood well. So we use the stories. Now they talk about 4 types of stories in this chapter. And so I'm just going to mention those quickly, and we'll talk about them. Number 1, the who I am story. This is your journey. I call it the Victor Kiam example. For those of you who remember the Remington Razor commercials of the 70s, I'm Victor Kiam, and I loved it so much I bought the company. Right? That's a testimonial proof that says, here's where I came from, here's what I learned, and I believe so much in this that I'm on board here. And so I think that can be a great who I am story. Any thoughts on who I am stories for you, Scott?
No, I love that example. And who I am is really getting into the who are you being while you're doing what you're doing. So it needs to start with who you are first as a human being.
Yeah, and he uses the example of the Simon Sinek book, Begin with Why,
Mhm.
and this whole why am I doing this? I think maybe that's been overplayed. I'm very worried about American business. We just had the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank the weekend before we cut this video or cut this audio, and the thing that I'm concerned about is they were more concerned with everything outside of banking than they were with actually banking. So
Mhm.
their why was great, but their execution sucked.
Right.
So I think we're turning into this why country instead of a do the right thing. Anyway, the second type of story is who I've helped story. And I really like this one. They call it a reusable example. And most of these stories are reusable. That's the thing. You don't have to have a new story for every customer you talk to. As you create a group of stories, you get to use them over and over and over again because every time it's a different customer. And so you get to reuse all your stories. Um, and I think what they're saying is I can do for others. I've done for others what I'm asking to do for you. I've done this. I've been there before. We've worked with companies like yours. We've worked with situations like yours, and we can do what we're claiming we can do.
Yeah, I think Les Brown said it when he was doing a presentation that I listened to. He said, "Make a point, tell a story. Make a point, tell a story. Make a point, tell a story. Close your presentation." That's simple, and I just love the combination between make a point, tell a story.
Yeah, I think that's really true. All right. The third one is who I represent story. And that's about the company. And the warning that they gave about the who I represent story is it's not a timeline. Don't go look at the timeline of your company and say, here's what we did. And it was started in 1823 by this. People aren't interested in that. They're looking for a story that means here's what I, as a company, stand for.
Mm.
And here's our culture. I think they're looking for a cultural story, not a timeline story. And do our cultures match? And I think, you and I have talked a lot. I know this is something that's very important to me. Don't do business with companies that don't match your values. You're going to
Right.
get in trouble. If there are companies looking for the cheapest price and you're not the cheapest price, you might as well get out of there because they're going to ask you to be the cheapest price with your great service. And it's just not going to work together. So who I represent can often say, are we the same type of companies that should be working together? Do we value the same things?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very well said.
And then the last one they talk about in this chapter, I'm hoping they go into more later on, the right tool for the job story. And these are different stories for other values that your company has. So maybe it's high quality service or coming to the aid of our customers when they really need us, or these are kind of proof of value stories, and you might have 10 of them because you have different values, and as you see that a company needs that value or you want to express that value to them, you should have a story that backs that up.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's really important because when you have the values and the reasons why people buy, then you just repeat the stories, just reuse the stories, and it's
That's right.
just a matter of just remembering what value points you have and what stories you have, and then tell a story in a way that is engaging to the prospect and it's relevant. Most importantly, we cannot discount that. Relevant, it has to be relevant.
Yeah, I think the other thing we have to worry about, and this is something I tell a lot of stories, as you know, Scott, do use a lot of jokes and stories in my presentations. And I tend to write down what I've used them for and who I've used them with. So I don't keep telling the same story because there's nothing worse than a guy that tells the same joke over and over again. And I've heard, it's like the last 3 times I heard from you, I heard the same story.
Right.
So you want to do kind of keep track of these and the group you've used them with. And you might even say, let's, stop me if I've told you this story before, but I think this is really an important point. So as you get further along in the sales process, you might find yourself worrying that you've reused a story. So I do find that I have to track them a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true.
So next week, our book, we're going to go on to chapter 7 in What Great Salespeople Do. So looking forward to learning more about the story selling.
So as we said in the opening, we're going to be talking about managing your time. There's a lot of opinions on time management. Seems to be kind of the largest area in sales, that and closing techniques. But we need to be able to really concentrate on time management And I always like to work with a sales team. And when I start working with them, I propose an exercise and I ask them to finish this sentence. I could sell more if only I could, dot, dot, dot. And the safe answer is if I only had more time. And what that really tells me is that you don't know what's important. You don't know how to make good time trades and you have no priorities because you have to exchange your time. If here's an example, here's a story. If you're at 60% of your monthly goal and it's the last week of the month, what would you do differently? And when you think about that, it's like, wow, everybody has the same resources of time. Why do others seem to close more sales? Why do others get to, get more done, have better results, live with less stress? And this really boils down to how they trade their time and what their priorities are. So today's your lucky day. I've got 10 ways. I welcome Bill.
The lucky 10.
Well. Yeah, so lucky 10 ways. And when Bill and I put 10 together, we usually get 20 or 30 out of it. So hopefully we'll have enough time. But number one is I always like to
hopefully we'll have enough time. Is that what you said?
Oh, yeah. How do you manage your time? It's a podcast. It can go as long as we want. There's no end. No, we're going to stick to our normal schedule. Describe a perfect day. I asked salespeople to describe a perfect day. We had Scott Welly speak at PSA. And I remember him saying this, when he talks to salespeople, he says, describe a perfect day. How do you feel? And the answer is like I was winning. And that is so true. When you think about a perfect day, it's winning. It's moving the ball down the field. But when you describe a perfect day, you're really looking at how are you balancing the time that you get and are given to be able to achieve all of your priorities in that. And Bill, what are some of the examples that you've heard of salespeople having perfect days?
I don't deal with the perfect day thing at all, to tell you the truth. I think that's a great idea, just not become part of the training that I do. One of the things I ask people to do is to block their time. I think what happens a lot in sales is that we get caught short. We have, this big list of to-dos, which is important. I think that's get your daily task list out. And I have at the top of my task list 4 different things that I do every day, which might be making phone calls or, things, responding to text message, anything that I have. These are things that I do every day to create more business, write some emails, those sorts of things. So I think that task list is important, but also block your time. I think the things that we don't like to do, we tend to put off. And I recommend taking the things that you don't like to do, if it's phone calling or whatever, and put those at the top of your list, get those done. And then your mind is clearer and your attitude is better for the rest of the day. So where I start the time management cycle or using my time best cycle is do your task list, have those everyday things that are going to grow your business, block some time out and do the distasteful things first. And that's kind of the early part. That might be what you call the perfect day.
Yeah. And it really boils down to is what is going to happen, not what happens to you. What are things that you are going to make a commitment to achieve? Like Bill said, take care of the big tasks, the big, hairy, audacious goals that you want to accomplish in the day and do that first. Number 2 is how is your performance being measured? And really be conscious of leading goals versus lagging goals. And leading goals are making the attempts, picking up the phone, making the attempts. I mean, you may get into a conversation, you may get an appointment, you may get a proposal, you may get a sale, but you have to really work on the front end of the funnel with the leading goals, and then the lagging goals will take care of themselves. Number 3, this is one I think you're very familiar with, Bill, is what is important and versus what is urgent. And I've seen you do a presentation on this, and I think this is kind of Dale Carnegie is one of the people that brought this area to topic. Is that true, or
maybe it's from something else? But the thing that we want to block our time out for is what we call quadrant 2 activities, which are not urgent but important. And I'm going to do a talk in April for business owners, small business owners, maybe 2-3 people, maybe solopreneurs. And this is where they fall down a lot. And that is something like reaching out to call and prospect new businesses. It's not urgent that I do it today. but it is important. And if I
Mhm.
skip that phone calling today and tomorrow and the next day, and now it's going to create an urgency because I got no business coming in. And if I can block my time out for those quadrant 2, not urgent but important activities like prospecting for new customers, then I have something coming into the process all the time. And if I don't do that, I'm going to be in the up and down cycle. So
Yeah.
what are those things that you need to do? And as you said, maybe those big audacious goals that you have, maybe you're trying to write up a project, or you're trying to create a whole new type of company that you want to go out and go after. And you need to set some time aside to think through that process of what are their needs and what are their issues and how would I make the phone calls to these kind of companies and what's the conversation that I would have and what questions would I ask. I think all that is important to put into that not urgent but important time block.
Yeah. Number 4, I have priority lists. So I think about the life wheel. For those of you that have followed along with the life wheel, I think Zig Ziglar talks about it, Brian Tracy talks about it. And it's just simply a wheel with all of your priorities on it. So how are you doing with your fitness? How are you doing with health? How are you doing with your faith? How are you doing with personal development? How are you doing with family time? I mean, everything that we do within a week is a spoke on the life wheel. So we have to be able to know what our priorities are at certain times of the week. So Monday through Friday might be, priority more on your job, your career, etc. The weekends maybe focus more on family and faith of doing that. So make sure that you do have priorities and you're focusing on what's most important within the week. And number 5 is schedule tasks in your calendar. So we're really tempted with tasks and activities, but we really also have to look at, is this a to-do list or is this part of a goal list? And a goal list is an activity that supports a goal. A task can be a bit of a distraction and something that we just have to check off, but it doesn't necessarily support a goal. So really know which ones you're working on. Is it a goal list activity or is it a to-do list activity?
Yeah, I think one thing to think about is what I like to do with my task list is I have A, B, and C level tasks. So the A level tasks are the higher importance, maybe higher urgency, and then I'll number those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, I think what you're talking about is, Scott, those things maybe that we don't want to do or that are more difficult to do. And we tend, if we don't organize those in some way, as you say, maybe schedule time to do that particular task, we'll keep pushing it to the side because it doesn't have the urgency that maybe a call from a customer might have. And so we never get them done because they always fall to the bottom of the list if we don't create some urgency to do those. I know for myself, because of the way I organize, I have to create urgency in what I do. When a customer says, hey, get that proposal to me sometime, I'll go, how about next Friday? And then I have a date and now I can work toward that date. So create that urgency, as Scott said, by putting it in your calendar. Now it's a thing. It's not just a future event.
Right. Allocating time to it instead of just a list, a wish. Number 6 is prime time versus non-pay time. So prime time is when your customers, prospects are available, usually Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, I'd say is prime time. And then non-pay time. So this is when your customers are not available. So when Bill talks about a proposal, I would highly recommend salespeople consider doing that maybe in the last part of the day. Maybe it's from 4 to 5 or 5 to 6, or even putting a proposal together on a weekend and getting it sent out first thing, and or have it ready for your follow-up call for the following week. But if you give yourself some time to be able to do the proposal on non-prime time, which is your non-pay time, it makes it easier for you to make good time trades. So number 7 is track your time in 15-minute increments. So when you look at your calendar, block out tasks within 15 minutes, and then you're able to get 4 things done within 1 hour and not be overwhelmed by something and allocating an hour to it. And then you allocate too much time for it, then you end up making good time trades during that 1 hour. And you've got to really compress your time and really concentrate on focusing what you need to get done within a certain period of time.
Yeah, I learned something from working with IT people. They do, I can't think of the name of it, but they do things in like an hour. So they'll say, okay, we got this task to do. Let's set the timer for 20 minutes or set the timer for 30 minutes. And the tick timer is going off. And now it's like, let's get focused down. And it's kind of that focus we feel when we're going on vacation tomorrow, right? It's like,
Right.
I got to get this done because I only have so much time. I know my son was going to go on a small trip, and he got a late project. Well, he worked till 2 a.m. to get that project done because the next day he wanted to be gone. And so we get that focus that causes us to say, this just became super urgent. And a timer like that can help us to become super urgent. As you say, give yourself that 15 minutes and say, how much can I get done in 15 minutes? And then you look at that and you go, okay, I'm going to do another 15 minutes because that was good. Or I got enough done. I'll put that to tomorrow. And now I can think of the next thing I have to do, but I've made movement on this large task in this last 15 minutes or half hour.
Yeah. Good advice. Number 8 is, I call it time to task. So think about, when are you most creative? Are you most creative in the morning or in the afternoon? And then create that routine task when you're not creative. So if you're thinking about, balancing your QuickBooks or doing, banking stuff, that's not creative. So do that when you don't have to have a full mind of creativity. It's kind of more of a routine. But think about, when are you most creative? I'm most creative first thing in the morning or on a Saturday morning. And if I'm going to write something, that's where I really concentrate on being creative in that area of my day. And then as the day goes on, I don't have as much creativity. So I do more routine stuff later on, 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon.
I see it I do it a little bit differently. I agree totally with what you say. But what I find is my afternoons disappear quickly. And so I like to make appointments in the afternoon. One, because I'm more creative in the morning, I can write better, it's quieter. But 2, because my afternoons seem to slip away on me. If I have 3 appointments, no matter what happens, I'm going to feel good about that afternoon. So I tend to do my creative things in the morning, my writing in the morning, and then try to get as many appointments in the afternoon as I can.
Yeah. Another good way. Number 9 is time trades. We make time trades. All of us make time trades of what we give up our time for, because we're giving up a portion of our life when we make time trades. And that's based on good judgments. And that is one thing that's very, very difficult to teach. So if you're in sales leadership and you're working with a salesperson, it's really important to stress that you believe in them and you believe that they have good judgment and you believe that they're going to make good time trades, and you're making them accountable and you're giving them an A right off the bat. Now, they can only lose the A based on how they make time trades going forward. But this is a great opportunity for coaching salespeople on how to make good time trades and exercising good judgment. And then the last one, number 10, most importantly, is know when to say no. We have a limited amount of time. And if we start saying yes to everything that's fun, we're not going to get anything done that's hard and isn't important. And we're going to be reacting to what's urgent. And we're going to be reacting instead of being proactive if we get too much activities on our plate and we don't say no to some things. And it can be very easy to want to please somebody by saying yes to things where you just frankly do not have the time. And Covey, I think, said it best, and you cannot do good in one area and bad in another. And your reputation is based on the results that you're delivering. And you have to deliver the results in the limited amount of time, but equal amount of time for you and everybody else. So those are my 10 points of trading your time better.
I want to go back because I think that's knowing when to say no. You talked about making those decisions based on your goals. And I think a lot of times when we need to say no is somebody's going to ask us to work toward their goals.
Right.
And knowing when to say no quite often is, oh, hey, Scott, can you do me a favor and write up a 5-page article that I can use in whatever, right? And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I could probably do that. And then 2 hours into it, you're like, what the heck did I say yes to this for? This doesn't advance my goals at all. So really knowing when to do those goals. Just a couple of things I want to add, because this is a great list that Scott made, but clear your desk of distractions. if you've got 5 projects on your desk, it's really hard to focus on one, and you're creating your own shiny object. So stack it up, move it off your desk, and get one project on your desk at a time. And then also don't believe the multitasking lie. There is no such thing as multitasking. There's bouncing around from project to project, or you've got the radio on, or you've got something on your other screen, and you're distracting yourself purposely. Your mind cannot stay focused when you got other crap coming into it. So turn it off. If you want to have some gentle music on, that's fine, but no talk radio, because it's going to throw your mind off. So stay focused, as Scott said, and use those 15 minutes increments.
Yeah. Good. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for giving us your time for that.
That's right. And if you have any other time ideas, send them over to us. We're always open to learning ourselves. We love to hear from our listeners, and we love to have you connect with us on LinkedIn. So feel free to do that. I'm going to close up with our golden nugget for this today. This is from Benjamin Franklin, and he said, "For every minute spent organizing, an hour is earned."
Mm-hmm. The master of time. I was thinking of Ben Franklin as I was putting this together. So I think he invented that too. The master of time. He invented time. I'm kidding. But
he invented time. That's good.
Yeah.
I know that somebody invented time. Scott might be overstating that a little bit.
Did he come up with the daylight savings time? I don't think so. Maybe not.
I don't remember when that started. Big controversy now. It's like, it's an hour. Get over it. All right.
Yeah. Everything Bill and I talked about today is going to be at winningatselling.com. So check out the show notes.
So just a couple things coming up, Scott. April 1st is our 3-year anniversary at Winning at Selling podcast. 160 some podcast, or 160, somewhere in that neighborhood, 156. And then, so next week, the book club, What Great Salespeople Do, chapter 7. And then I'm going to talk about a HubSpot blog called Key Sales Challenges for 2023. And Scott and I will bounce that back and forth and tell you what we think about those sales challenges. Please subscribe, share the podcast with your colleagues, put it on your social media. We'll have it in the queue here probably by Friday of this week. And I'll be sending out a LinkedIn on Monday or Tuesday of next week. So if you get on our LinkedIn, you'll know when every podcast comes out. Go out and get better, one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.